Hey worship leaders, so a while back I made a video about the Line 6 reverbs, and specifically the reverbs that are unique to the Helix family, the Helix, the HX Stomp, and the Pod Go. And I made that video because it's the video I wish I had when I was trying to decide if I wanted to purchase the Stomp. I was trying to find a video where I could just hear people playing through those 5 reverbs. I really want to know what they sound like and how they compare to other reverbs. If you haven't seen that video, you can go check it out here. But since then, I've had a lot of people asking me, hey Jimmy, can you show us how you dial in those reverbs? See, in that video, all I did was drag and drop the reverbs in and let you hear what they sound like. And I thought showing you how I dial in these reverbs is a great idea, and I hope it's helpful for you. But instead of trying to cram all 5 into one video, I thought I would do like a little mini series where you'd walk through each 5 and I could show you how I use each of the reverbs. So today we're gonna start with the first reverb that comes up in the list, and it's called the GLITZ Reverb. Now I have a couple caveats before we get started. Everything you see in today's video and the other videos in the rest of the series is meant to be a reference or a guide. It's not the rule. There is no one size fits all when it comes to reverb. There are too many things to take into account when creating your tone, and that's really the fun of it. The point of today's video is to help you figure out what will work with your guitar, what parts you're playing, and where you're playing it. The second caveat is there are a bunch of different tricks and tips with routing and a bunch of stuff that you can use to make your reverb sound even better, but we're not gonna cover any of that today. That's more advanced than what we're gonna get into. Today we're just trying to get the best sound that we can when we drag and drop the reverb into our chain, which brings up the third caveat, and that is chain order, signal flow is really important when talking about reverb. What I'm gonna show you today in HX Edit, you'll see I'm gonna dial in today's reverb with the reverb at the end of the chain. But if you put the reverb before the amp and cab or even between the amp and cab, it can really alter the sound of your reverb. A lot of people may not know that. You can't just drag and drop the reverb in wherever you want. It's gonna sound the same. It's kind of like, when you think about your signal flow, it's kind of like a river. If you were to take red dye at the bottom of a river, it's not gonna affect anything upstream. But if you were to take that red dye and pour it in at the beginning of the river, it's gonna color everything downstream. Same is true with signal flow. Whatever you put at the beginning will flow down and color whatever's after it. There isn't necessarily a right or wrong here, but it's good to know that going into it. But just a quick rule of thumb, you will get the most out of your reverb, whether good or bad, when it's at the end, when it's after your amp and cab. Now that might be something you want. You might want to tame your reverb sound, or you like the sound of it being placed before the cab. Like in my experience, I like putting the effects loop of this Revelation reverb in between my amp and my cab. I think it sounds the best there. Like I said, no right or wrong, it's whatever sounds best to you. But today we're gonna be dialing in this reverb with it at the end of the chain. Now there are 3 steps that we're going to walk through. Number 1, we're going to see what the reverb does, what makes it so special. Number 2, we're going to tame it. We're going to bring down all the parameters so that we can jump into step 3, which is dialing it in, bringing back the sounds that we want for each situation. Now I say for each situation because there's a lot that goes into figuring out how you want to run your reverb even after you get it like you'd like it. Now in this series, my goal is to make 3 different sounds or 3 different tones per reverb for 3 different scenarios. We'll have our rhythm tone, our lead tone, and our ambient tone. Now let's jump into HX Edit and take a look at the stock settings of the GLITZ Reverb as a reference. Alright, so as you can see here, we have US Deluxe going into a dual cab, and then I drug in a stock GLITZ. These are the stock settings. Let's hear what it sounds like. In all honesty, I think they do a really good job of getting the GLITZ usable just like it is when you drag it in. It doesn't sound the best, but you could use it just like this and it would be completely fine. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna walk through those 3 steps and dial this thing in. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drop in this other GLITZ, and we're gonna be able to go back and forth, toggle them on and off so we can see the difference between the stock version and the one that we create. So now I can turn that one on and off, turn this one on and off. All right, so we have our stock. The first thing we're going to do is ask what makes this so special, and what I see here is that it has this extra layer of parameters down here, the delay, the rate, depth, and I think what's going to shape this reverb's tone the most is this crossover and the mod mix. Let's hear what they sound like when we move them around. Wow, you almost can't hear that at all. This is about where it was before. So to me, it just kind of has this harsh, almost organ-like sound that I don't really like, and so I'm going to try to dial that out. Now, a good rule of thumb is when you're dialing in reverbs is that you want to get rid of too much low end. So you don't want your tone to be too muddy, but you also don't want it to be too shrill. So first we're going to work on the low end and get the low end out of there so we can hear our tone come through. Now, I think with the crossover about 3.6 and the mod mix is 7.3, it gives me a nice clean tail that's not too shrill like it was before. Let's hear what our other one sounds like. That's a cool sound, but I prefer sounding like this. It's a little less low end. Now let's play with this delay a little bit. It's so minuscule of a delay, it's kind of like pre-delay, but we also have a pre-delay function here. I wonder what happens if you crank them both up. I'm wondering if that's just the pre-delay of this particular modulation effect on top of the reverb. Now, if you don't know what pre-delay is in the world of reverb, I actually made a video going through all the basics of reverb. You can go check that out here. But basically, it's just separating your picking tone from the trails of the reverb. And this is important for very ambient reverbs so that your tone doesn't get lost. So I cranked up this pre-delay to 88. That sounds pretty good. I put the depth about 36, the delay about 83, and the rate about where it was. Now what we've done so far already sounds a lot better. We've already got into step 2, I forgot to mention it, that we are taming the reverb. We've taken what makes it special, we've begun to pull it out, we're taming it so that we can then add back in what we want. And since I talked about we were trying to take away low end, we've already taken away a lot, but I'm gonna go ahead and continue that and bump up this low cut all the way, and then we'll add back in if we feel like we need to. This is what this sounds like with the low cut all the way off. Now that sounds good that we got the low end out of there, but I think the high end is also coming through too much, so I'm gonna just take that all the way down and we can bring it back as we need it. Now I notice when you do these things, then you can start bringing back things, but I kind of like the way that sounds, so all I really want to start bringing back in now is, seems like we can have a little more mix and a little more decay. Now I feel like we have the Glitz Reverb in a very usable place, and now we just need to do step 3, which is begin to dial back in what we want. But we really need to be thinking in the 3 categories I mentioned: a rhythm tone, a lead tone, and an ambient tone. Now the Glitz Reverb is already a really ambient reverb, so let's just go ahead and start there because we already kind of have a really ambient setting, and then we'll tweak it from there to get our other 2 tones. Now if you're doing some really light ambient stuff or even swells, I think you can begin to bring in some more of those high-end frequencies. Let's try it. I think that's a really good ambient tone right there. We didn't take away everything that makes it special, but we really did tame it. We brought in just enough to make it where like, okay, that's different than another type of reverb. I bet it also does swells really well. Let's try. So let's work backwards. I usually like to think rhythm, lead, then ambient, but we're already at ambient, so let's work backwards. If I were to think about a lead tone, what would I want? I think I would want a little less high end, maybe a little less mix, and a little less decay. Let's check it out and see what we think. Let's add some overdrive, crank the amp, see what we got just as it is right now. Way too much. Let's take it down. We're gonna take down this high cut, bring down the mix, maybe even bring down the decay. Now already that sounds a lot better. Let me bring back in the high frequencies just to see what it would sound like now that the decay and the mix are down. One thing I do know is that when you're isolated in your room and you're just listening to your headphones, you're not playing with a mix, that things will seem brighter than they do when you play live. You lose a lot of that detail when you go into a live venue. And so what I do is I tend to make my reverbs sound good in my ears, but then when I get there live, it's like the reverb is almost not there anymore. And so what I've begun to do is start making my reverbs a little bit more harsh, a little bit more prominent without losing my tone so that it actually sticks out in a mix. And I think what we have here does that well. Now what do we want from a rhythm tone? When we think about rhythm, we're usually strumming a little more. We have more notes involved at one time, so we want a lot less reverb. So we need to start pulling this back even more for a rhythm tone. Let's try this. We'll get rid of the amp drive and our overdrive, put our pickup in the middle position, and strum some chords. Now that's really tame and it's probably what you want for rhythm, but I feel like we have room to add a little bit more back in. Let's bring up the higher frequencies. We'll bring up the mix a little bit and we'll bring up the decay a little bit. When we add in the higher frequencies, it starts getting out of control a little bit too much. Let's see if we pull that back. That sounds pretty good. So let's walk back through each and then we'll compare them to the original Glitz, the stock settings, and see what we got. So that was our rhythm. Let's bring this back up. For our lead tone, we took out the high cut, we brought this up. I think it was somewhere around here. And our ambient tone, we just brought up this high cut to about here. Turn off our overdrives. And hear what we got. And this is the original Glitz, the stock settings. See, it kind of has this like flutter to it, kind of almost a frequency that's just, it doesn't sound good to my ears. All right, one more thing I want to cover before we move on is I want to see how our reverb sounds with other effects. So we already heard what it sounds like with overdrive, but something else I like to do to add to reverb is to add in a nice delay, and that can really help the way a reverb sounds. So I'm adding in this modulated chorus echo, and we'll hear what that sounds like by itself. It's really wide. We add our reverb back in. Let's see how it helps our lead tone. Well, man, that sounds pretty good. I have no idea how long this video is gonna be. I think it's a little bit too long, but I'm gonna go ahead and shut it off now. Look forward to the other 4 videos. I'm gonna go through the Ganymede, the Searchlights, the Plateau, and the Double Tank. I don't know if that's the order. So look forward to those coming up in the next few weeks. If you did like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. If you think this video would be helpful for anybody, please feel free to share it. If you don't know, I have my HX Stomp preset bundle for sale right now for $8. And actually, if you enter the code HWL25, you get an extra 25% off. That makes it $6. Link is in the description, go check it out. Hope you guys have a good day. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.